last meeting, what we deal more of is feminist criticism or feminist theory. So, and we learned that this theory has something to do with empowering women. Okay, so its main purpose is just to empower women from based on the historical context. That is where it was based. Okay, so for queer theory. So what is queer theory? So queer theory grew out of feminism and gender studies in the 1990s. So malayo kasi yung pinag-ugatan talaga rin ng queer theory. So before it was brought out because of some gender issues or gender concerns that were prevalent during those periods, during those times. Even before 90s, there's still a concern when you talk of homosexuality. Kaya during their time, many were, if women are not empowered, there are many um, individuals who could not really express who they are, you know what I mean, because they're part of the LGBT community. So they really have that kind of restriction. So they are restricted to express what they want to express on themselves. They have this restriction on um, entering a relationship that's part of that restriction. So meron silang ganong repression that because of that restriction in the society where they're living in during the time, there is the so-called repression and suppression towards them, psychologically speaking. So because of those things that had encountered by different individuals, so nag-brought out din itong queer theory na ito. So what's with queer theory? Yun ang ating i-discuss muna. And then later on, paano ba gamitin yung queer theory sa pag-analyze ng isang literary works, because that's the essence of literary criticism, utilizing the theory to analyze certain literary works. So it explores, challenges the way in which heterosexuality is constructed as normal. Alam ba yung normal na heterosexual? Okay, babae tsaka lalaki. So babae ganito malamit, lalaki ganito malamit, babae ganito kumilos, lalaki ganito kumilos. Yung babae ganito ang trabaho, lalaki ganito ang trabaho. So that those stereotype that we observe from that previous times up to current period kasi it's still prevalent up to this time. Meron at meron pa din. And the way media has limited the representations of gay men and women in the society. Okay? So, dyan nag-ugat yung queer theory niyan. Kaya ito yung sinasabi natin pinakang recent development when it comes to gender studies, when it comes to literary criticism. It is one of the recent theory. Okay? So, it challenges the traditionally held assumption that there is an oppositional divide between being gay and heterosexual. Okay? So, equality ang pinag-uusapan diyan eh. That there is oppositional divide. So, mahilig kasi tayo sa binary. Kapag lalaki, babae. Kapag babae, lalaki. Kapag straight, gay. Di ba? All of that, we always have that kind of binary thinking. That's part of our social norm. Okay? So, ano pa yung mga binaries na nakikita natin sa ating society. Kapag ganito ka kumilos, brusko ka kumilos, lalaki ka. Pag lalamya-lamya ka kumilos, automatically bakla ka. Pag babae ka naman, tapos mainhin ka kumilos, babae ka. Kapag medyo brusko ka naman kumilos, tomboy ka. So yung um, mga ganong gender representation na stereotype which causes gender trouble. Yung term na gender trouble ay ginagamit na ngayon ginagamit ngayon si Judith Butler ang gumagamit ng term na gender trouble. So later on, we'll be discussing about gender trouble na yun. So okay, so queer theory suggests sexual identity is more fluid. Okay? Pag sinabi natin fluid, parang you just go with the flow, you do what you want, you express what you want. Okay? But however, because of the gender trouble thing in our society, that leads to a conflict. Okay? Um, ang conflict nga natin, hindi lang between the person in the society. Eh. Yung conflict, uh, between you and you, 'di ba? Yung sarili mo mismo meron kang conflict. Kaya nagkakaroon ng repression within yourself alone. Okay? So, in this theory, the word queer, ayan, ulitin natin na the word queer is not necessarily a synonymous term for gay, but rather a position that rejects conventions. Kaya may nagsabi peculiarity, something strange, something unique, that rejects conventions or mainstream expressions of all types of behavior that include sexuality and gender. So that's what we meant by queer. So kumbaga, it's uh, it's something, sabi nga ni Russell, peculiar in our society. Pero kasi ngayon, with the kind of society that we have now, specific society but not society in general, specific society, siguro ito sa Philippines, pwede natin may specify na meron na rin namang acceptance of homosexuality dito sa atin. At meron na ring acceptance of LGBT community in our society, at least meron sa atin. And we are being recognized. Although meron pa rin talagang machismo concept tayo rito. At meron pa rin talagang stereotype. We cannot delete that. We cannot delete that or erase that in our society. Kasama't kasama yan. Yung gender trouble na yan. Kasama't kasama yan sa ating lipunan. So, it's, kung ang mga babae nga na straight, okay, ay nakaka-experience ng discrimination, what more those people na who do not belong on the perceived norm, conceived norm of the society. Okay, so again, when we talk about queer, it does not pertain to homosexuality in general, but again, a notion that suggests that it's rejecting a convention or mainstream. Kumbaga, something out of the usual that we see in our society, pero because of that unusualness of observation of that in our society, nandun pa rin yung acceptance. The only problem with the Philippines is yung tolerance. Hindi talaga totally 100% na acceptance. Ang nangyayari lang is tinotolerate lang. Hinahayaan. Okay, ganun ang nangyayari sa atin. Hinahayaan na lang. Pero yung tolerance na yon, merong ring negative implication yun eh. Kasi the more that you tolerate them, pero yung buong lipunan is not accepting. They're just tolerating it. Paulit-ulit pa rin yung problem, okay, with regard to gender discrimination. Okay? Kasi tolerance is not an assurance of 100% acceptance. Kumbaga, umuo na lang sila dahil wala lang, parang dating wala lang choice, nandiyan na yan. Ganun yung tolerance. Eh. Okay? There are two individuals who really delve into studying queer theory. They are Judy Butler and Eve Sedgwick. Okay? Although magpapaka-judgmental lang ako sa kanila, pero I'm not so sure of their gender identity, but looking at their photos, para silang mga lesbians. Okay? Para silang mga lesbians. Pero I'm not so sure. Pero siguro uh, wala kasi nagsasabi kung what of their gender identity eh. If they are a women or lesbian, walang nagsasabi. But pag kung magpapaka-judgmental ako sa kanila, then I would say na nga they look lesbian. But again, since we are into to queer theory, it's not acceptable to judge them based on how they look. Okay? So, all the world's staging gender merely a performance. Mamaya pag-aralan bakit ba sinabi natin na ang queer or ang gender and sexuality is a performance. Bakit ba nasabi? So, Judith Butler and Ed Sedgwick riff their ideas from Foucault. Okay? So, ano ba sinabi ni Foucault about homosexuality and heterosexuality? Doon ang galing yung kanilang idea of performance na later on di-discuss natin. So, they developed the groundwork for queer theory in the early 90s. One of their central ideas is gender performance, just like what I mentioned. Okay, so this is Judith Butler. Okay, so this is Judith Butler. So she suggests, that gender is the result of nature, but is not the result of nature, but is socially constructed. I'm sure that you had already attended a lot of seminars with regard to gender. Kasi when we talk of sex, we are pertaining to being male or female based on the biological construct of an individual. So that's inborn, that's innate. Kung halimbawa they do have the male genitalia or female genitalia, and that becomes our basis of whether an individual is a male or female. Okay, so however, when talk of gender, it's socially constructed. It is uh, it is you as a person could tell who you are. Okay, sometimes uh, it is affected by the kind of environment we are living in, the kind of society we are living in that affect our behavior. Okay, yung iba nagsasabi it runs in the genes. It runs in the genes. May ganong nagsasabi na it runs in the genes. Okay, although I read some literature, what I mean of literature is studies, related studies before that says na meron nakita silang link that probably being um, homosexual runs in the genes. 'Di ba may kasabihan nga tayo sa Pilipinas, oy, lahi niyo na 'yan, 'di ba in the Philippines. Okay? So, according to Judith Butler, gender is socially constructed. Okay? Male and female behavior roles are not the result of biology. Yun nga sinasabi ko sa inyo, yung kung may female or male genitalia ka, and that will tell us if you are either male or female. Okay? Rather, it is by society, reinforced by society through media and culture. Okay, so may malaking influence din daw ang media on the construction of ourselves. If our conceived notion of who we are is can also be, sabi ni Judith Butler, can also be affected by our exposure with the media or by the kind of culture that we are exposed to. So let's say if you are exposed in an environment wherein they are queer, meaning to say, napapaligiran ka ng this kind of people, then more likely that you have this tendency to become like them. So parang may ganong teorya si Judith Butler. Kaya niya nasabi that it is socially constructed. Okay, she sees gender as a performance. Okay, bakit niya ito nasabi? So, what do we mean by performance? Hindi ito yung sumasayaw, kumakanta, tumutula, or what. It has something to do with the talent. It has something to do with the role that we perform. When we talk of performance, let's say for example, if you are a woman, di ba ang role na ginagampanan mo is ikaw nag-aalaga sa mga bata, ikaw nag-aasikaso ng ikaw nag-aasikaso ng pagkain ng iyong anak. Ikaw yung taong bahay. Kapag ikaw naman ay lalaki, ikaw yung nagtatrabaho sa pamilya. We call that performance, gender performance. So may kita nyo rito sa ating image, yung basic na assumption na ginagawa ng isang babae. Okay? Sabi nga natin, queer theory developed from um, from feminist perspective. Kaya makikita pa rin natin yung mga ganitong assumption. Okay? Yan, gender roles. Yes, gender roles. Another term for that. So that's what we meant by gender performance. So kapag halimbawa ay kumawala ka doon, kasi nga queer ang pinag-usapan natin. Halimbawa ay kumawala ka doon sa isang gender performance, doon ngayon nagkakaroon ng tinatawag nating gender trouble. Doon na ngayon nagkakaroon ng tinatawag nating queer. Halimbawa, kung si lalaki ay kinakita ang description natin when we talk of male persona, naglalaro ng basketball, naglalaro ng baril-barilan, naglalaro ng kotse-kotsehan. Okay? Pero, kapag nakita ang isang lalaki na naglalaro ng Barbie doll, sasabihin agad, bakla. Kapag halimbawa ang isang yung kasi yung gender performance ng lalaki, 'di ba? alam natin, nagbabaril-barilan, ganyan, etc. etc. So, kapag kumawala siya doon sa gender performance na yon, doon ngayon nagkakaroon ng notion, okay, hindi nga siya, pinagdududahan na natin yung sexuality ng isang tao. Okay? So, ganyan yung sinasabi nating gender trouble that results from the concept of queerness. Okay? Ito, just to sum up what I said, there are things boys are supposed to be, say, do in a culture, and think that girls are supposed to be, say, and do in a culture. And your parents and your peers will likely remind you of these gender normative rules. If you decide to break them, then that's what makes you queer. Queer. Okay? So that is why Judith Butler argues that there are a number of exaggerated representations of masculinity and femininity, which cause, again, the so-called gender trouble. Okay? But Butler additionally argued that feminism had a mistake by trying to assert that women were a group with common characteristics and interests. Okay? Kasi raw sabi niya, yung feminism, ay kumahon ka rin sa kababaihan. Pero kapag queer theory ang pinag-uusapan, kakawala ka sa kahon. Okay? Kaya yung yung argument niya that there is really an assertion na uh, assertion about women na that they shouldn't be boxed on this kind of norm. Okay, so Butler said, perform an unwitting regulation and reification of gender relations, reinforcing a binary view of gender relation which are men and women. Ito sinasabi ko kanina na binary complex na babae, ito ang gagawin mo, pag lalaki, ginawa mo. Kapag kumawala ka doon sa konsepto ng binary na yon, nagiging queer ka. Okay, so additionally, Butler argued that rather than opening up possibilities for a person to form and choose their own individual identity, feminism had closed the options down. Okay, so parang gusto niya sabihin dito na dahil nga medyo kinahon mo na kung ano ang kababaihan, ay tila parang hindi mo na parang naging judgmental ka na rin towards other sexes. So halimbawa kapag kung ikay feminist at kumawala ka do at hindi ka kumawala doon sa box na yon, you do not get out of the box, then it's not what queer theory is all about. Queer theory is about fluidity, okay? Doing the things as you want. It's all about sexual fluidity, okay? It's all about fluidity. You go with the flow. So whatever you express, whatever you want to do, regardless if it is beyond the norm, kahit magsuot ka ng pambabae pero ikay lalaki, okay. Kahit ikay babae, nagsuot ka ng panlalaki, okay. Yung gustong ipaglaban ni Butler. Okay, so wag mong ikahon. Halimbawa, gamitin na natin tong mga Disney princesses na to. So isa-isahin natin si ito. Nakalimutan ko tuloy pangalan nitong isang to. Si Sleeping Beauty ata to. Okay. Okay. Pretty girls don't even need to be alive to get some hot princely action. Siya kasi Sleeping Beauty. Kasi nga naman kahit tulog siya, may lumapit sa kanyang babae. May prince na lumapit sa kanya, di ba? Ayan sige, basahin muna natin yung comment nila. So, being a woman is having practical skills and a multitude of talents. Okay, phenomenal woman with a heartfelt beauty. Si Aurora siya, si Aurora. Okay, thank you, thank you, Ime. May na-contribute ka ngayon. Okay, so as a woman, ito naman sabi ni Jasmine, as a woman, your political worth is reduced to your marriageability. Okay? So kapag kinasal ka na pala, nawalan yung political worth mo. Yung mga simple implication ng women parang women disparity. If you're beautiful enough, if you're beautiful enough, you may be able to escape your terrible living conditions by getting a wealthy man to fall for you. Ito yung na-discuss natin last meeting sa feminism, di ba? Na sinabi nga doon ng mga ng theories na diniscuss natin is that women are no longer marrying for love, but they are marrying for wealth during the period ng time ni Jane Austen. There was a period during that time. And I think meron pa rin naman ganun up to now. Okay, sabi naman ni Bells, tama ba? Si Bells, si ano tayo, sa Beauty and the Beast. Appearances don't matter. What counts is what's in your heart unless you're the girl. Alright. Okay, ito naman si Ariel. It's okay to abandon your family, drastically change your body, and give up your strongest talent in order to get your man. Once he sees your pretty face, only a witch spell could draw his eyes away from you. Ano naman sabi ni Cinderella? At first, it may seem terrible, being so beautiful that other women get jealous enough to try and kill you. But don't worry, once your beauty attracts a man, he'll protect you. So, nakakatawa, di ba? Pero if you're just going to read between the lines, there are issues that are reflected from these statements. Kumbaga, para ang nangyayari, from the views of these women in this Disney princesses, parang ang dating is nagiging object na sila. Object. Okay? Nagiging parang object of desire. Let's say, itong sinabi ni Aurora, get some hot princely action. So it suggests objectification of women. Okay? Your political worth is reduced to your marriageability. Okay? Social concern to na may kinalaman sa discrediting women to express their political will. Okay? Maganda rin tong point ni Paula. They also depended to men rather than on themselves. Okay? So, ito yun. To sum up, yung binanggit ko kanina. The Sleeping Beauty needed a man's kiss to wake her up. Pero again, just like what I mentioned, there is a social issue that is reflected there. Okay? Although babae itong pinag-uusapan natin kasi nga ang queer at ang feminism magkadikit halos. Okay? So, needed a man's kiss to wake her up. Ano ibig sabihin nun? May objectifying. Ino-objectify ang mga kababaihan. Jasmine needed to be saved by a man. Hindi ba kaya ni Jasmine iligtas ang sarili niya? Parang ang dating, parang ang weak naman ni Jasmine. Di ba? Belle civilized the beast with her domestic charm. So parang ang nangaakit pa si Belle. Okay? So Cinderella lost a shoe that ultimately led the prince to finding her. Okay? So parang how tragic for a girl to be without her favorite shoe. Parang implication nito is that parang na-discredit naman dito si Cinderella as a woman. Okay? Snow White lived with 7 men and was also rescued by her prince. So lagi na lang bang ganun ang projection natin sa kababaihan weak at laging diniligtas. Ariel left her family, boys and fiends for a chance at love. So, babae naghahabol sa lalaki. So, parang mag, natutuwa tayo sa kanila. Pero if you just going to dig into, makikita na, oo nga no, bakit ganito yung pinoproject ng mga Disney princesses na to? Baka dahil sa feminist perspective, kasi nga siguro, ang producer ng Disney ay mga lalaki. Writer nito, lalaki. Yung original writer nito, lalaki. Okay? So, and minodify pa to ni Hans Christian Andersen. Lalaki rin. Di ba? May mga ganong implication. So, since, dahil nga lalaki sila nga yung author, of course, sabihin man natin sinadya o hindi or unconsciously, ginagamit nila na pinapalabas nila that women or are less powerful compared to men. Okay? Kaya nga wala rito si ano eh, wala rito si Mulan. Wala si Mulan, 'di ba? Okay, yes. Tama, wala rito si Mulan kasi nga si Mulan empowered woman. Wala rin dito si sino pa bang mga Disney characters natin. Ayan, si Elsa wala rin, 'di ba? Yes, yung sa Brave wala rin. Kasi nga brave siya. Yung si Elsa, 'di ba? Si Anna wala rin. Okay? Pero may kita mo kay Elsa. Tama. Ay, yung bata ay si Elsa ba si Anna? Basta yung bata, the younger sister. The younger sister parang ay, si Anna, naghahabol din siya, 'di ba? Kay kay Guy. Okay. So, next, tingnan naman natin yung marurupok lang ang nandiyan. Exactly, never. Yung mga pabebe. Yung mga strong, like nila Mulan, wala. Okay, now we have Eve Kosofsky Sedgwick. So he is a professor of English at Duke University. So there was this article published in New York Times entitled "Queer Theory is Entering the Literary Mainstream." So it was written by Denise Smith, again published in New York Times, way back January 17, 1998. So it was republished then in the same uh, site. Okay, so sinabi ni Eve Kosofsky Sedgwick that um queer theory it's about trying to understand different kinds of sexual desire and how the culture defines them. So makikita natin yung similarity nung culture defines them from his view with what Judith Butler mentioned about culture. But one input that we can get from Kozovsky or from Eve Sedgwick is when he said that it's about trying to understand different kinds of sexual desire. Kaya ano ba yung sexual desire na sinasabi niya? Maybe it's something to do with the libido. Okay? So, another one, queer is about how you can't understand the relations between men and women unless you understand the relationship between people of the same gender, including the possibility of a sexual relationship between them. So queer has something to do with that. Understanding, having a being broad-minded enough to understand the different situations, the different views of people. Okay? So, kapag nagbabasa kayo ng mga article, ako, pag nagbabasa ako ng mga comments, let's say, pag may pinost si Vice Ganda in Ayon, kapag nagbabasa ako ng mga comments, meron pa rin talaga yung lumalabas. Meron pa rin lumalabas na mga against on that kind of relationship that sinasabi it's only just the pera na kailangan ng lalaki kaya nakikipagrelasyon doon or bakla rin daw si Ayon kaya ganon. So uh, meron akong nabasa I don't sa ano ata yan, sa comment section din na kasi sa Philippines napaka-diverse ng ating ano 'di ba? Napaka-diverse ng LGBT. Sa ibang bansa, let's say in US prevalent pa rin ito and even in some parts of UK. Although nakikita natin na ina-accept nila yung same-sex marriage, pero nandun pa rin talaga yung kapag nakipagrelasyon ka, hindi uso sa kanila yung straight gay relationship. Kapag ikaw ay babae at nakapagrelasyon ka sa babae, automatically tomboy ka. Kapag ikay lalaki, nakapagrelasyon ka sa kapwa mo lalaki, automatic gay ka. Sa Philippines hindi. 'Di ba? Meron pa ring conceived notion na kapag lalaki ka, pwede kang straight ka, pwede kang makipagrelasyon sa sa kapwa mo. Okay? So doon in the US and even the UK, they have that kind of thought na um, if you are having a relationship with same sex, automatically it's either you're lesbian or gay ka. Ganun yung thinking nila, which is like here in the Philippines, na pinaglalaban pa rin nila. Which I think naman it's if we say that gender is fluid, then it's possible. Okay? If gender is fluid, it's possible. Okay? So, um, napakahabang argument pa noon napakahabang concern pa ng mga yan. That's why it is a very long journey, especially because of the different views, 'di ba? Ng iba't ibang bansa, ng iba't ibang kultura. Kaya sinabi talaga ni Butler tsaka ni Judith that it's the culture that defines. Okay, just like yung na-mention ko nga sa inyo na iba-iba yung perspektibo. Okay, so the dividing up of all sexual acts, indeed all persons, under the opposite categories of homo and hetero is not a natural given process, but a historical process. Okay? Bakit nasabi natin historical process? Yung katulad ng kinuwento ko sa inyo na napakahaba, kung yung sa babae pa lang, yung acceptance sa yung accepted naman ang mga babae, pero ang pinaglalaban lang talaga nila is an equal recognition. Kung ano yung recognition na binibigay sa mga kalalakihan, yun din yung gusto ng mga kababaihan. Yun naman yung pinaglalaban ng feminism. Okay? So, kung yung mga kababaihan may ganong history, mahaba rin ang history ng homosexuality. Okay? Mamaya may mga examples ako. It is still complete today and ultimately impossible but characterized by potent contradictions and explosive effects. Nakakatakot yung explosive effects. Yung sinasabi yung explosive effects, parang ito yung tinatawag na gender trouble na Judith Butler. Na kung saan, di ba, there are times talagang dumarating sa point na sinasaktan, binubugbog. Katulad yung ginawa ni Pemberton kay I forgot the name of that trans woman, yung ginawa ni Pemberton. Dumarating sa point na gano'n. Okay? That's the tapos recently lang 'di ba yung taga-Antipolo, yung ah, ano bang nangyari sa kanya doon, yung pinagmumura-mura siya nung matanda, si Aling Susan, ay si Aling Susan. So yun, yung sinasabi ng explosive effects. Okay? Yung mga ganong situation na demonyo, may sabing demonyo ka, ano ka, a lot of words, mga below the belt na words, mga discriminating terms, um, mga scandalous terms na mga binabanggit nung ni Aling Susan. So that could be um, an implication nitong sinasabing explosive effects ni Eve Sedgwick. Okay, so sabi nga ni Ime, ang daming entries ngayon ni Ime Hindi ka na mali ng pasok ngayon. Okay, you don't see gender, you only see people. Correct. Meron pong gay at lesbian na mag-asawa, fluidity ba tawag? Yes, fluidity tawag doon. Tekla, 'di ba? Kung patol sa ano. OGDS. Okay? Fluidity tawag doon. Okay? They do not just look at from, yes, Jennifer Laude, yung nangyari kay Pemberton. Okay? So, thank you, Alvin. Puro si Alvin pala to. Okay, then, so still according to Eve Kozovsky-Sedgwick, so she describes queer theory as the open mesh of possibilities. Ganda, gusto ko yung term na open mesh. Open mesh of possibilities, gaps, overlaps, dissonance. Pag sinabi nating dissonance, ito yung we're trying to convince ourselves. Ito yung nagtatalo yung ating kalooban para mag-subside lang yung panghihinay, yung pagtatalo ating kalooban. Nag-iisip tayo ng paraan para lamang ma-compensate yun. Okay, that we call it dissonance. And resources, lapses, and excesses of meaning when the constituent elements of anyone's gender, of any sexuality are made to signify monolithically. Okay? So, simple lamang gustong sabihin niya rito is yung uh, pagiging open-mindedness ng mga tao about the situation. Because with that open-mindedness, hindi lang tolerance ang pinapairal, but because of that open-mindedness, there's a possibility that probably baka yung queer will be accepted na. Yung beyond the norm of the society will be accepted. But again, it's a long process. Sabi nga niya, it's a historical process. Napakahaba. Okay, I don't know if you have heard of Alan Turing. So, favorite ko yung buhay ni Alan Turing eh. So, just to give you an idea of who is Alan Turing, he is a mathematician during World War II. Okay, so sa Great Britain siya, sa United Kingdom siya. Okay, so bakit ko naman isama rito si Alan Turing? So siya lang naman ang kauna-unahang masasabi natin nakaimbento ng isang computer na nag-decode ng mga messages ng mga Germans. Kasi during that time, ang mga Germans sumusugod sa US. So, na-discover nila na parang for the Germans to communicate with others, yung mga kasamahan nila, nagsisend ang mga Germans ng mga codes, mga cryptic messages. So, ang ginawa ni Alan Turing, gumawa siya ng machine na nagde-decode ng mga cryptic messages na yon ng German. Kaya, nagawa nilang paghandaan yung paglusob ng mga Germans. Isa yun sa napakalaking contribution ni Alan Turing. Nakatulong siya sa giyera. Sa laki ng naitulong niya, nung nalaman nilang si Alan Turing pala ay isang homosexual, parang all things fall apart by Chinua Achebe. Parang all things fall apart. Nang dahil lamang sa pagiging homosexual niya, nawala lahat yon, na-discredit siya. Okay? At during that time, there was a law in United Kingdom na kapag ikay homosexual, it was considered as a disease. Hence, you have to take in medicine. Alan Turing accepted the verdict. Nawala siya sa limelight, na-discredit siya because of who he is. Kahit pa sabihin natin malaki ang naitulong niya sa gobyerno at sa giyera, na-discredit siya dahil nga sa pagiging homosexual niya. During that time, hindi pa na-accept totally or 100% ang mga homosexual. Kaya may batas na kapag ikay homosexual, mag-underwent ka ng medication. Okay? So, malapit rin siya sa puso ko dahil ang pangalan ng kanyang machine ay Christopher. Bakit naman Christopher? May kwento. Ang pangalan ng machine niya ay Christopher. Tuwa talaga ko si kay Alan Turing eh. Yun yung pangalan ng kanyang bebe. So, hindi naman sila naging sila. Kaya lang, secret love niya talaga si Christopher. Nakilala niya si Christopher nung siya ay nag-aaral pala. I forget the school where they studied. But he met Christopher in the university and they become close. But there's alam nila parang nararamdaman na sa isa't isa parang they like each other, but because nga of the kind of norm that they have in the society during that time, hindi nila na-express at wala silang chance to 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 explore their love. Basta they're just happy to be together, but walang ganong sabi nga ni Lem, not labeled. Parang wala silang ganon. Pero yung namatay itong si Christopher due to tuberculosis. May pelikula ito, I forgot the title. Basta may pelikula yan. Okay? Kaya talagang tumatak sa utak ko itong si Alan Turing. Okay? So, banhapin nyo na lang. Basta i-search mo si Alan Turing tapos yung pelikula niya panoorin niyo. Napakagandang pelikula. True to life story ni Alan Turing. So, yun nga. Yung ginawa niya yung machine, tinawag niya itong Christopher. Ayan. Or short, Chris. Okay? Ayan. So, yun yung kwento. Sabi ni Eme, homosexuality shows weakness before, correct, that falls into Turing syndrome. Toxic masculinity. Wow, very good. Nagamit ng Turing syndrome, toxic masculinity. Tama yon. Okay, thank you for that input. Meron nga ganyan tinatawag na Turing syndrome or toxic masculinity. But it was, I forgot the exact date, but it was in the year 2000 something eh. Yung binigyan siya ng posthumous award. So, nakakalungkot, di ba? It has been so long from 1930s or 1920s. Nung 2007 to 2006, I'm not 2000, basta that's around 2000 to 2007. Parang between that year, doon lang siya binigyan ng posthumous award ni Queen Elizabeth. Okay? Kaya tapos bumuo na tinatawag na Turing Law, pinangalan sa kanya na may kinalaman sa homosexuality. Na kapag halimbawa ay may abuse na nangyari sa isang kalalakihan ay sa isang homosexual, yung batas na kumo-cover para doon sa protection na tinawag na Turing Law in honor of Alan Turing. Kasabay ng posthumous award na binigay sa kanya. Ayan, parang yes, parang Imitation of Game yung title. Imitation of Game. Ayan, parang yun nga. Okay? So, yan yung kwento ni Alan Turing. So, yung sinasabi natin na example ng queer. Okay? Pero, merong explosive effect. Yung nangyari sa kanya talagang literal na explosive. Matapos siyang iligtas yung buong England sa explosive na pagsabog na galing sa Germans. Ang explosive effect naman sa kanya is yung ganun nga. Tinuring siyang parang may sakit. The explosive effect. Para sa Josh Stone and Amy Winehouse. So meron dito. So both have built their success on challenging expected notions of femininity. Okay, so kilala si Amy Winehouse, siya sikat na singer sa US. By living up to her bad girl image, excessive consumption of drugs and alcohol, she mixes an excess of traditional 1950s and 1960s femininity by wearing retro dresses that emphasize the female shape and long hair with a range of tattoos that would once have been considered masculine. Kasi 'di ba sa atin, ito yung sinasabi, parang may pagka-queer din ito eh. Kasi ang norm natin is that kapag babae, 'di ba, hindi masyadong nagtatats, tapos very lang, light makeup, parang babaeng babae talaga. Pero kapag nakitaan na parang um, yung features niya similar to a man, kaya minsan napapagkamalang lesbian. But Amy Winehouse, um, we're not sure kung siya ba talaga ay lesbian or what. But the point there is that yung get up niya is encompassed the norm ng time na yon. And then we have Joss Stone. So this model actress, by being overtly sexual at a young age. Okay, meron din siya niyan. I'm sure kilala niyo siya, si Kirsten Stewart. So this was her photo during the time when sikat talaga yung Twilight, 'di ba? So ang aura ni Bella is babaeng babae. Okay? So, napaka-finis. Although may pagka-rugged, kumilos, pero may kita mo sa kanya yung pagiging feminine niya. But, ganito yung feature niya kahit sa tunay na buhay. May pagkaganon when she is with Robert Pattinson that time. Kaya naging magka-relasyon nga rin sila, di ba? But, ito na siya ngayon. Okay? Simula nung nagkaroon siya ng film na kung saan ang role niya is lesbian, doon na siya nagsimulang mag-get out. I don't know, baka merong effect yung film sa kanya, yung na-realize niya yung sarili niya, baka merong effect yon. Kasi nga, she played the role of a lesbian on that film. Now, ganito na itsura niya. Okay? So, she's now a lesbian. Hawag niya si Emma Watson. Emma Watson talagang very feminine yung aura. Kaya lang itong I don't know, baka kasi nga nagpaka-rebellious, napaka-rebellious nung aura ni Kirsten Stewart ngayon. Simula nung nagkaroon siya ng issue doon sa kanyang director na nakarelasyon niya. Kung saan alam namin yung kwento. Kasi fan ako dati ng Robert tsaka Kirsten Stewart eh. So, talagang sinusunod ako tong dalawang to. So, naghiwalay because of that. 'Di ba? Yung nagkaroon ng relasyon si Kirsten Stewart kay dun sa director, yung gumagawa siya ng film, and that ends the relationship with Robert Pattinson. So ngayon naman si Robert Pattinson, chinichika na gay. I don't know, baka kasi nga panoorin niyo na lang yung film niyang Little Ashes. Wala yun sa Pilipinas eh, pero nakakuha ako ng copy. Little Ashes. Okay. So, ayun, ito, example of queerness. Okay, queer. Ang standard natin na kababaihan ay ganito. Pero kapag nakita natin ganito na yung itsura, okay, ano natin is lesbian. Okay? Of course, it is not complete without me mentioning this very historical gay literature. Okay, the very historical film ever. Okay, ito talaga yung mother of BL series. Yan. Kung baga kung merong reyna, kung may hari, it's Brokeback Mountain. Yan talaga. Okay? So, uh, it was a very known film ng panahon ng 20s. Okay? Ang setting niya is 1963. The characters are Ennis Delmore and Jack Twist. They are hired by Joe Aguirre to herd his ships through the summer on the Brokeback Mountains. So pumunta sila sa bundok at doon silang dalawa lang for many days. And yung tagal nila doon, meron silang na-discover towards themselves. The the anima in them, the feminine side in them. Okay? Yung doon sila nagsimulang magkaroon ng sexual exploration within each other, that they have realized that they really like each other. Kaya Brokeback Mountain. So, after a night of heavy drinking, Jack makes a pass at a hesitant Ennis, and Ennis eventually responds to Jack's advance. So, napakagrabe yung scene na yun. It's still lingering in my mind. Panoorin nyo na lang. Okay, so it is played by Sumalangit Nawa ni Heath Ledger. So, kilala niyo naman si Heath Ledger. And of course, my ever crush si Jake Gyllenhaal. Yan, si Jake Gyllenhaal. And one of my favorite actors na si Anne Hathaway at Michelle Williams. Nakikita niyo rito, ang si Ennis at si Jack, meron yung makarelasyong babae. Okay? Si Jake Gyllenhaal kay Anne Hathaway, si Heath Ledger kay Michelle Williams. So may karelasyon silang babae. At may eksena nga doon na Ennis and Jack are doing something when I think Michelle Williams saw it. Okay? Si Ennis at si Jack may ginagawa. Kasi right after they went back from the mountain, si Ennis at si Jack merong nakikita pa rin sila, and they secretly seeing each other and secretly doing the F thing, and Michelle saw it. Diba? Ang sakit naman sa girl. Okay. So, ganun. So, parang may pagka-fluid din eh. They're both, parang may bisexuality ba sila or what? O siguro, since nga gender fluidity, they just go with the flow. Go with the flow. Kung ano yung naramdaman nila with each other that night when they were at the mountain, they just do it. They just express what they felt. Okay, of course, we also have now, ito ngayon yung trend yung BL series. So we can really see there the exploration of sexuality, of homosexuality. Pero ito lang ang point ko although kinikilig ako dito kina Bright tsaka kina Win, kina Tyne tsaka kay Sarawat dito sa Together Series. What I have noticed is how their environment, how their community accepted who they are. Parang it sounds too good to be true. Kasi Thailand naman kahit pa sabihin natin accepted yung mga trans, yung mga may kita pa rin doon, of course, hindi 100% will accept you. Pero dito sa sa Together and Still Together, yung part 2 niya, yung season 2 niya, may kita mo na parang walang nangyaring complication with regard to doon sa how the people are surrounding them react. Parang walang nagkaroon ng rejection, more on acceptance. I think um yun yung siguro yung mensahe nila very tama nga, parang too good to be true nga yung dating nung nitong Still Together. Pero I think the intention is that this is the kind of the society that we will achieve if nandoon yung acceptance. Yun naman yung takeaway ko dito sa palabas na 'to. I'm not although I look at it nga as too good to be true. Parang kasing, why is it that most of the fans accepted agad si Sarawat? Why is it that the school accepted sila agad, the students, their friends, their family, accepted sila agad. Yung kuya ni Sarawat, accepted agad siya. Yung kuya ni Time, accepted din siya agad. Paano yung mga kuya at mga kapatid nila, meron ding mga relasyong iba. Okay, parang, okay. So, that's the kind of environment they have. Parang the community that's surrounding them accepted who they are. And the message is that if we have that kind of society, maybe we can have that kind of harmonious relationship. Which is unlike dito sa Dark Blue Keys. Dark Blue Keys is more realistic than Still Together. Dark Blue Keys is more realistic. In a way na tiningnan ko siya doon from the perspective of how the people around them react towards the relationship. How they try to hide the relationship. Which is, if you're just going to look at that kind of of behavior dito sa Pilipinas, siguro dahil nga sa Pilipinas tayo, yung tiningnan ko siya doon sa lens na 'to, parang it's more realistic kasi ganito yung nangyari sa Philippines, eh. Yung nangyari sa Dark Blue is ganyan yung nangyari sa Philippines. Yung may mga magkarelasyon na same sex that they are restricting themselves, tinatago nila dahil unang-una, takot silang malaman ng kanilang pamilya, takot silang malaman ng kanilang kaibigan, takot silang malaman ng mga taong nakapaligid sa kanila. Okay? So these two BLCers from Thailand really sent us a message of inclusivity. Okay? Inclusivity talaga and acceptance. Yun yung mensahe talaga nila. Na dito pala sa Dark Blue Keys, yung um, na it's possible. Nakakatawa nga eh. Ito nakita kong parang nakakatawa. 'Di ba? Ang usual na norm is that mas takot umamin ang isang gay sa kanilang tatay kasi ah, yung machismo concept, 'di ba? Pero dito, yung itong si Tai Tawan, ito. Abay, madali siyang na-accept ng kanyang tatay. Kaya mabilis siyang very out and loud siya sa kanyang tatay. Which is unlike dito kay New na tinatago niya talaga kung sino siya. Although mas effeminate nga siya kasi si Tawan is masculine eh. Siya may pagka effeminate kaya itong si New. Okay, pero sa kanya um parang mas takot pa siya, parang may takot-takot siya na sabihin kung sino siya sa kanyang parents, sa kanyang mother, 'di ba? 'Di ba usually sa atin sa Philippines na mas ah, mas magaang magsabi ng sexuality mo doon sa mother mo. Dito hindi, pinakita talaga nila yung reverse. 'Di ba? It's a very interesting message na meron silang talagang gustong i ibahagi sa atin na mensahe na no, regardless of just tell who you are and people will accept you. Parang it's some sort of giving others encouragement to not restrict kung sino sila. Okay? So, yun naman. Kaya pero mas kinilig ako dito. Kung kilig at kilig lang, dito talaga ako sa Still Together. But when it comes to the message, yung pinakamalalim na mensahe at may pinakamaraming exploration ng mensahe, ito talagang Dark Blue Keys. Malalim ang pinanggagalingan ng mensahe nito. Okay? Well, anyway, so maganda rin ang kwento nitong Hello Stranger. Okay? Very interesting yung character dito ng dalawa. So, dito sa role ni Tony, may kita talaga natin kung papaano siya nag-explore sa kanyang sexuality, kung papaano niya rin-restrict yung sarili niya. Kasi nga 'di ba, meron siyang karelasyong babae diyan na isa siyang head turner sa kanilang campus, siya talaga yung tinitilian, siya talaga yung gustong-gusto ng mga tao. Pero ang sa kanya is tinatago niya. Kasi nga iba yung kanyang pinoproject eh. siya ay masculine, macho, ganun yung image niya eh. Pero, yung nakilala niya si JC, parang a soft part of him. Yung parang kanyang, yung anima sa puso niya, the feminine side ng kanyang is that, na-realize niya that she's starting to like him. Why? Pati may kita mo sa kanya na, siya mismo, confused. Ano ba talaga ako? Okay? Ano ba talaga siya? Kaya, um, it is life-changing on his part when he met JC. And of course, si JC, although very obvious sa kanya na may pagka-effeminate na sa kanya, ang inatay lang ng mga kaibigan niya sa kanya ay, kailan ka ba mag-re-reveal? Parang it's obvious na kung ano ka. Ba't hindi mo pa rini-reveal? Parang ganun lang. So, um, kaya maganda rin, kaya talaga nag-click ito. Kasi I think, compared to Still Together, may pagka-realistic din ang portrayal ng Hello Stranger. And every homosexuals could relate to. And recently, we have Ben and Jim. Parang si Ben dito, parang si ano rin si Tony, 'di ba? Meron din siyang karelasyon na babae, pero meron din siya may part na naguguluhan siya, may part na mayroon siyang reservation sa sarili niya, meron siyang inhibition, parang hindi siya so sure doon sa kanyang nararamdaman. Pero meron siyang nararamdaman towards kay Jean. Pabebe lang talaga dito sa kwento si Jean. Okay, pero in fairness to goodness on part of Ben, dumating siya sa point na um, reveal niya kung ano siya in the public. Kasi di ba very famous si Ben. Okay, so ano bang implications na pwede nating makuha rito? Again, it's about fluidity. It's about uh, what queer is all about. Parang ganun din yun. Fluidity rin yun. So, allows us to consider concepts such as transgenderism, moving between genders, transsexualism, physically changing gender, intersex, both sex present effects, of course. It's a genital disease. Hindi pala disease. It's a condition, a physical condition. Yung both sexes present para hermaphrodite. And we have pansexual, a sexual attraction not based on gender. Diba? Pansexual. Trigender, a gender outside of male or female amongst others. Diba meron pa tayong asexual na talagang walang-wala, walang pakiramdam sa iba. Okay. So, the good thing about this BL series na pinapalabas ngayon, yung nagkakaroon na rin ng courage. Ito yung nakikita kong mga possible implication ng dati. Nagkakaroon na rin ng courage to explore this kind of film. At for sure, hindi lang tayong mga nasa LGBT ang nanonood. Maraming mga kababaihan din ang nanonood nito. 'Di ba? Kung kayo yung mag-aaral nito, napakagandang pag-aralan to sa reader response. Paano kaya mag-respond ang mga nanonood nitong babae? 'Di ba? Mga babaeng nanonood ng ganitong uri ng palabas. Sa reader response. Ano kaya yung naglalaro sa kanilang isipan habang pinapanood nila itong ganitong eksena? But I like it more compared to pink films na talagang nauso nung ako'y college, nagsimula yung pink films na yan. Yun talaga grabe, yung pinanggalingan talaga ni Coco Martin, mga ganong eksena. Ito talagang BL series, it's more of para siyang very light, although napaka-heavy ng emotion, pero what I mean is very light, napaka wary nila when it comes to um, depiction. Pati yung pagpapalabas, hindi ganun ka-bold, hindi ganun ka, ka-obscene ang mga scenes. Okay? Okay, so when we talk of heteronormative, from the term hetero, which is heterosexual, male and female, yung pagiging straight man and straight girl or woman, normative, the norm of the hetero. That's what we meant by heteronormative. Para hindi nyo siya makalimutan. LGBT inclusive discourses often reinforce heteronormativity and binary construction of sex and gender. That is the social understanding that there are two distinct genders. women and men only. It's part of heteronormative that are synonymous with two distinct sexes which are female and male. So kapag ikaw may male genitalia, ikaw ay men. Kapag may female genitalia ka, ikaw ay may women. Ito yung binary constructions of sex. However, that the expectation of being a woman is to desire men, both emotionally and sexually, vice versa. That's what we mean by heteronormative. Na kapag ikay lalaki, sa babae ka, kapag ikay babae sa lalaki, sa ano ka, sa other gender, other sex ka. So, ito yung what we mean by heteronormative, yung pagkakaroon ng binary constructions of sex. Ay, binary construction of gender naman. Halimbawa, katulad ng nabanggit ko, kapag hindi ka nagswak doon sa norm, bakla ka or tomboy ka. Pag hindi ka nagswak doon sa nakikita nila, perceived notion nila kung anong lalaki, bakla ka. Kung pag hindi pumasok doon sa requirement nila na maging babae, tomboy ka. Yan yung heteronormative with regard to binary constructions of gender. And of course, hindi mawawala ng mga homophobia. Ito talagang may tendency na magkaroon ng excessive, tawag dito, explosive effect na tawag natin due to gender trouble. So it is the hatred of gay people for well-being gay because of people are afraid of anything they don't understand or because nga, they are close-minded. Um, they just box with what they think is the right thing and they're not opening up their mind. Now, there's a possibility there is this kind of of people. Kasi narado nila yung kanilang isipan. So many people harbor some romantic feelings towards people of the same sex at some point in their lives, and that scares them. So nagkakaroon ng mga homophobia kapag nagkaroon sila ng other encounters with same sex. Siyempre, nagkakaroon ng trauma. And because of the trauma, ah naging homophobic sila. Meron silang previous encounters. Okay? Posible yun. Halimbawa, posibleng mangyari ay isang straight guy na ginahasa ng isang bakla, 'di ba? Kaya siya naging homophobic. Or bata pa yung bata nagkaroon ng na-molest siya ng isang gay, naging homophobic. May mga ganung effect. So, psychologically speaking. Now, the results now is the so-called gender trouble na kanina ko pa binabanggit. Dung mga binanggit ko kanina, ayan, it all boils down to gender trouble, which is a term coined by Judy Butler. So now, na-mention ko na sa inyo what is a queer theory. Ayun yung mga konsepto pumapasok sa queer theory. And nabigyan ko na rin kayo ng pahapyaw kung paano tingnan yung mga literature from the lens of queer theory. Okay, pahapyaw lang. But now, how to analyze literature from the lens of queer theory. So, isa-isahin natin. At dito, nakahanap ako ng isang framework na which will guide you when analyzing literary works na kung saan ang gagamitin nyo ay queer theory. So, in literary analysis, the goal of queer theory is to understand one, representations of adult sense from gender perspective, to understand gender in general, to understand sexual identity, and to understand sexual orientation. So, ito yung objective ng queer theory. Okay? Ayan. So, kapag kayo mag-aaral ng isang literature at gusto nyo gamitin ng queer theory, pwedeng ito yung maging goals nyo, maging objectives ninyo. Excuse me. Dami talagang entries ngayon ni Ime, Very good to. Minsan pa ganun din pinalaki ng parents ang environment. So they don't educate their children because sometimes they themselves don't understand it. Okay, so again, very good Ime on that insight. Okay, so in literary analysis, again, the goal is pwedeng ganito ang inyong pag-aralan. So queer theory also teaches the reader to look at every other literary genre with a new set of critical eyes. The character in the novel and film that we think we know so well become newly strange and a whole set of new questions arise. Mamaya meron tayong ibibigay na kung paano ba mag-set ng mga objectives para kapag-analyze isang literary work. Ito yon. So, It was published in Journal of Literacy Research, so examining queer elements and ideologies in LGBT themed literature, what queer literature can offer young adult readers. So maganda yung naging research nila at maganda yung ginawa nilang framework in analyzing queer theory. So it was a study conducted by Molly Blackburn, Carolyn T. Clark, and Emily A. Nemeth. So ang ginawa nila, pinag-aralan nila yung iba't ibang mga young adult literature. Tapos kinategorize nila yun, kinategorize nila yung mga yon. And they analyze it using the following literary elements. These literary elements, ito ginather lang nila ito, uh, and then sama-sama nilang ginamit hanggang sa makabuo sila ng isang framework na binubuo ng mode, focalization, naive and unreliable narrators, metonymic configurations, flashbacks, and foreshadowing. So, these are the 5 literary elements na pwede nyo gamitin if you will be studying uh, a literature from the lens of queer theory. So, what is a mode? So, parang simpleng alamin lang um, kung ano ba yung call this genre ng isang literary work mo. So, mode is typically understood as a circle or compass, divided into quadrants including irony, romance, and tragedy. So, with comedy opposite of tragedy, and romance opposite of irony. So, this is the concept came from Caden in 2010. So, you just have to identify bakit ano bang klaseng mode ang ginamit dito sa literary work na to? Irony ba? Or comedy, romance ba or tragedy. So ngayon, kapag romance, why is it becomes romance? So paano ngayon yung depiction ng mga characters from romantic mode? Pag comedy, paano ba yung depiction sa mga ah, characters na part ng LGBTQ community? Kapag irony, paano ba pinoportray sila? So this is how important mode is. Okay? So Caden asserts that most children's literature is romantic and or comedic, with little movement beyond or between these. The problem with this, he claims, that these modes do not provide much room for change by either protagonist or the readers. Okay? So he argues that irony and tragedy are more likely to produce change as a result of provoking cognitive dissonance and discomfort. So mapapansin niyo kapag children's literature daw, hindi masyadong ah ine-explore yung pagiging protagonist at pati pagiging antagonist ng isang character. Siguro nga dahil nga it's a children's literature. Wherein nakikita niya na most of the literary works na pinag-aralan niya, siguro ay mga children's literature kaya nagkaroon siya ng ganitong connotation. Okay? So, ang irony and tragedy are more likely to produce change as a result of provoking cognitive dissonance and discomfort. Unsettled by those feelings, the reader is pushed to engage the dialectic tensions posed by the competing values, ideas, and beliefs. Kasi pag sinabi natin, di ba, irony, it's the opposite of the others. Parang ito yung mangyayari, pero ito yung nangyayari. Parang gano'n. So, that's irony. And because of that concept of irony, parang mas nagiging mas malalim pa raw yung mga kwento. So if you will be studying literature and then you notice that there is an irony in the story, how it is portrayed, paano na portray yung irony doon sa kwento. Let's say for example yung Dark Blue Keys, may isang irony ako nakita nga doon, 'di ba? Ironically, yung tatay ni Tai mas mas mabilis nakapag-out si Tai sa kanyang tatay. Dito naman kay New, nahirapan siya makapag-out sa kanyang nanay. Eh, ang norm na alam natin 'di ba, mas nahihirapan mag-out sa mga tatay. Doon sa Dark Blue it's the other side of the coin. Okay, parang napaka-ironic na ang bilis makapag-out ni Tai doon sa kanyang tatay. Okay? So, yun sinasabi natin irony doon sa concept. Ngayon, pag tragedy, how tragic it is. Let's say, um, paano ba paano ba nag-lead to tragedy yung mga characters na members ng LGBTQ? Himayin nyo. Bakit ba nag-result sa ganun? Ano ba nangyari? Okay? So, by understanding the mode of the the literary work, it will guide you now. Ano ba yung tension na meron? And by understanding the tension in the story, based on understanding if it's irony, tragedy, malalaman nyo ngayon kung ano yung punot dulo ng mga kwento. Okay? So, it's something that you can explore. Now, focalization. Focal. And then, focalization is when some part of the story, perhaps a scene, event, or character, is described through the point of view of a character who has unique beliefs and values which shape his or her interpretation and thus representation of the story. So ngayon, naalamin nyo ngayon doon kung ano ba yung, kung yan ay let's say focalization of the character. So, ano yung pinakang struggle ng isang character? Okay? Ano yung parang focal point ng isang character doon sa kwento. So, paano ngayon naka-apekto yung siguro could be the beliefs, the views of the character. Yun yung pagtutuunan nyo ng pansin. So, how does that focalization affect yung content or representation ng kwento? Pwede ring scene ang maging ang focalization ninyo. Pwede ring scene. Halimbawa, may eksena doon na tumatak sa isipan nyo habang pinapanood nyo. Okay? So, pwede nyo nang explore ninyo at paunawan nyo sa mambabasa. Okay? So, it's more of just explaining it. Okay, halimbawa, a character might be focalizing that is representing the scene, event, or character. Or a character might be focalized. Okay, so, pwede yung character mismo ang nagre-represent ng scene. Focalizing a scene. Pwede yung character mismo yung focalized point that is represented through the eyes of a different character. Pwede rin yun. Halimbawa, um, uh, halimbawa ay character A na meron siyang laging kasama. So, anong iniisip lagi ng isang character na yon doon sa taong yun? Okay? So, you can interpret that. Let's say kung pinag-uusapan natin dito ay queerness, queer theory. So, kung halimbawa ay merong nasabi ang isang character niyo sa pagiging bakla o pagiging tomboy ng isang character, then pwede niyo i-catch 'yon. Okay, bakit niya kaya nasabi 'yon? Okay. Okay, there may be few or many focalizer in any literature. The more focalizers there are, the more polyphonic or multi-voice it is. Pag sinabi ng polyphonic or multi-voice, parang mas marami kang maririnig na boses. Okay? Kapag maraming focalizers kang nakikita doon. Halimbawa kung characters yan, napakaraming focalizers kang nakikita, mas nagiging multifaceted yung description mo. Mas nagiging thick ang description mo doon sa character na yun. Okay? Halimbawa, sa isang character, pwede mong kuning focalizers, yung kaibigan lagi niyang kasama, yung nanay niya, yung tatay niya, etc. Sino mga nakapaligid sa kanya? Ano sa tingin yung iba-ibang views nila towards sa sexuality niya? Sila ba ay against? Bakit sila against? Sila ba ay okay sa kanila? Bakit sila naging okay? So, establish their relationship. That's how focalization works. Okay, and building from Calvin's argument, we must assert that such texts are also the most queer because they avoid a single static and instead offer multiple at times conflicting ideologies. Now, naive and unreliable narrators. Kung meron tayong focalizers na pwede nating pagkunan ng mga magagandang insight views and how they interact with other characters in the story. Meron din tayong mga naive and unreliable narrators. So, sino naman sila? A naive narrator is one who is believable and challengeable, often less sophisticated or confident, and thus offers the readers through her or his naive discourse a contestable view of the world. Ito ngayon yung mga baka mas sabihin natin mga antagonist sa buhay noong main character natin. Sila yung kumbaga nagbibigay ng different flavor, okay, different view sa atin. Okay? The contestability of naive narrators contribute to the multi-voiceness of the narration, and we assert to the ideological diversity and queerness of a text. So kasi yun ang kagandahan kapag ah, merong tunggalian between characters and another characters. Makita mo talaga doon yung how rich the description will be. Kasi pwede mo ipaliwanag kung bakit ba hindi okay sa kanya yung ganitong uri ng ginagawa ng taong ito. Okay? Next is metonymic configurations. It is the way in which patterns of behaviors which are marked by gender, sexuality, and other normalized constructions are built up through the simple fictive practice of developing conflict and or thematic implications through interactions amongst diverse and contrasting characters. Okay? So, ang metonymic configurations, ito na ngayon pwede yung pasukan ng description nyo about discussion nyo about norms ng society, sinusunod ng society, pwede nyo pasukan yan doon. Metonymic configuration. So, as Rameren and Stephens describe, for example, a character's behavior may be marked by attributes which prompt readers to instant stage a schema for hegemonic masculinity. So, halimbawa nga, kapag gusto nyo pag-aralan yung hypermasculinity na pinoportray sa isang hypermasculinity uh, portrayed in a certain literary works, paano ba nag-manifest ang hypermasculinity doon? Pag sinabi natin hypermasculinity, again, ito yung parang yung super macho image. That's hypermasculinity. Yung parang they are delineating the power of women and they are trying to project that they are the most powerful being. Okay? So, yun yung hypermasculinity. No? So, paano ba pinakita yung hypermasculinity dun? So, try to figure out the pattern of the behavior na isa-isahin nyo. Bakit siya naging hypermasculine? Okay? Bakit mo nasabi na effeminate ang character niya ito? Aalamin mo yung behavior niya. Okay? In the case of such a male character, he not only fulfills a story function but also is apt to function as a metonym for hegemonic masculinity in relation to other characters performing different kinds of masculinity as they enter the novel's configuration of gendered behaviors. I think I already mentioned this. Okay, so Ramran and Stevens note that both masculine and feminine metonymic configuration are possible as are other relational patterns, including father-son, mother-son, school situation, sports, and so on. Ito yung sinasabi ko sa inyo na tingnan nyo yung behavior, yung pattern nila, kung bakit sila nyo nasabi na ganun sila. So, kapag kasi nakuha nyo yung focalization, di ba, sa focalization, at gusto nyong bigyan ng emphasis yung character na yun, doon pala makukuha nyo na yung doon pa lang makakuha na kayo ng idea kung paano nyo atakihin yung metonymic configurations. And of course, flashback and foreshadowing. So, alam naman natin yung flashback. So, sabi nila Bay and Young, na pwede nating maunawaan yung isang character kapag alam natin yung pinanggagalingan nila. And with that, we need to study the flashback. Okay? Tells what has happened in the past. Or, pwede nating i-project kung anong mangyayari in the future. Or what we call the foreshadowing. Presents what will happen in the future with respect to the now in the story. Okay? Flashback and foreshadowing work as temporal disruption. Ano bang sinabi natin temporal disruption? Temporal means time. So, time. Okay? Dinidisrupt natin yung time. Okay? So, particular when those temporal disruption mattered in the experiences of a character being or becoming a queer. Halimbawa, literary devices may have a heterochronous effect. That is, they effectively disrupt time. Heterochronous. Hetero, is yung pagiging babae, pagiging lalaki. Chronos means time. Okay? So, halimbawa, is when there is a change or distortion process aligned with time, or in Lemlech's words, it is the intersection of processes in practices which have radically different inherent timescales. With timescales meaning how long any given process takes. Halimbawa rito is yung uh, the length of time, the length of years in which a particular acceptance of that particular character in the story delve into, pwedeng pasukan ng heterochronous yun. Gaano ba na ba katagal yung pinipigil yung sarili niya kasi nga ganoon yung kinukonsep ng society nila. Okay? So, heterochronos. Next, applying the elements in literary analysis. So, ito yung sinasabi ko sa inyo, pwede natin gamitin yung framework. So, ito yung 3 iterations of book analysis. Book analysis pero literary analysis. I-adapt lang natin siya. Although book ang ginamit, pero literary analysis ang gagawin natin term. Ito yung framework na ginamit sa pag-aaral nila, yung binanggit ko kanina, na study. So, title, author, plot summary, mode. Ano ba siya? Ironic, tragic, or comic, which may reveal normative disruptions. Second iteration is character analysis. Ang narrator ba ay naive or unreliable? Okay? Focalized characters. Sino yung focalized characters mo? Sino yung pinagtutuunan mo ng pansin? Focalizing characters. Yung character, sino pinofocus ng character? Yung focalized character, ikaw mismo as a reader, yung nagpo-focalize. Focalizing character, yung pinofocalize ng character sa isang character. Character to character. Mawanag? Okay. Now, in order to help you in the analysis, how are these characters, sexual and gender identities in families or homes conceptualized throughout the literary work? When pertinent LGBT inclusive and or queer ideologies are represented by focalized and focalizing characters. What pertinent inclusive or queer ideologies are represented by focalized characters? Then third iteration, scene and panel analysis. Overall approach to or organization of scenes. Ano bang ginamit sa kanya? Chronology, flashback, or foreshadowing? What does this reveal about the the literature's chronotype? Yung time. Ano time sequence. Gaano ba nakatulong yung time sequence para mas maunawaan natin yung story? Chronotype. Scenes that provoke heterochrony or disruptive heterochrony. Okay, again, pag sinabi natin heterochrony, it has something to do with disruption of time. Pag sinabi natin disruption of time, yung call this yung hindi ko masabi sa English. Hindi ko maano yung writer. Yung parang transition of the characters from this to this. From straight to ganito. How long? Bakit tumagal? Bakit mabilis yung kanyang pag-transition?
Genesis excerpt. For the handsome one whose hirsuteness I praised by Felino S. Garcia. We have no need for clothes, two Adams with ribs, who, craving for no Eve, needing no serpent to instruct us, or on new ways of sinning. Ano parang may relationship between both men and they don't fall in love with an Eve which nagre-represent sa women.
Yes.
Parang queer talaga po.
Okay, yes. Yung queerness may kita talaga dito yung queerness dito sa aspektong ito ng tula. Okay? So, two Adams representing men, Eve representing women. Okay, so tingnan natin sinabi ng classmate.
Poem written on a ferry crossing Guimaras Strait. Excerpt by Felino S. Garcia. Daddy, your touch still wounds me. Finger, prints of pain left blue. On my flesh, these welts I know where. Like second skin, I still recall your hands like storm. Winds slapping my face, your eyes, bloodshot from the battle of whiskey and origin. You had gulped. In a second or two, your hands had raised. Family niya. It likes, din po, connected siya sa mga homosexual or sa mga LGBT community natin, wherein the first one na minsan hindi nag-a-accept sa kanilang identity or yung revelation nila is their own family po. That's it.
Very good. 'Di ba? At very straight to the point, daddy. So, gusto niya talagang sabihin na hindi nag-a-accept sa kanya yung tatay. 'Di ba ito yung binanggit ko kanina sa inyo yung tungkol nga doon sa Dark Blue Kiss na very ironic doon sa Dark Blue Kiss. Okay? So, parang ang dating nito ay yung kwento na ako ay isang sirena. Ganun, yung kanta nun. Okay? So,
Safer Sex Blues by Jane Elsie Garcia. When it comes in my mouth, I grow queasy with sweets and seas, bottom oysters, and chili lick. Come off the inside of this tie. When I come in his mouth, he buries his face in a towel, breathes deeply from the heart, and with so much passion spits it out. Is it something I eat? Regalo na.
Shyly na, hindi yung Shily Shyly Lem Ano Lem? What can you say?
Well, sir. Ayun. The point talks about the sexual experience nung siguro homosexual to siya.
Mm.
Basta alam niyo na 'yon.
well, I think kasi nga, it's
Ayun pa sir, basta binimili sa immoral na naman ako.
linis natin Okay, so if you want a safer S blues, spit it out. Is it something I ate? I really like that line.
Rampa by Marlon G. Lucas. Chiclet at coke sa loob ng madilim na sinihang maamoy at mausok. Mga reyna banderada, sige, and sige ang paroot paritos sa pagpili ng bagitong magogoyot masisilo. Halarito kuplang doon, di alam kung saan paroroon. Parang pusang di maihi, inaahas kahit bungi. Service boy na forgets, sing alamega na long playing. Pilding magpauring, wakyeme pero kyono. Wag lang lalampas sa 3-oo, nyura lang mama, take home na, ang minchang na Dakota. Sige rampa sa Delta, sumutsugi pati sa galeria. At kung walang pang Santa Mesa, dyan na lang sa circle sa kanto ng Pilcoa.
Naintindihan mo ba? Naintindihan mo ba?
Mga baklang rumarampa, sir.
Okay.
Kung saan-saan.
So, kung saan-saan. It's nangyayari talaga yan. Kasi, kaibigan ko ganyan Di nga lang ako sumasama. Kasi nga, wakyeme. Ano yung hindi yung 300, yung 300 pesos. Ang mahal pa nga 150 na lang yan Walang nasamang Harrison. Anyway, these are some of the examples of poem in Ladlad. So Ladlad is an anthology of literary works published by gay writers. So two of the known persona when it comes to gay literature is no other than the Danton Remoto and the Neil Garcia. So kapag naririnig sila Danton Remoto at Neil Garcia, so these are the two prominent people in the field of gay literature. Okay? So that would be all for today. I do hope that you all learned a lot with our discussions from the beginning till end. Okay, so